32 Meridian and
Copy, Meridian. If there's still active shooting, we'll take the Bearcat, head that way. 39.
Upper Sioux, it's going to be Locust Grove and U-Stick, and they just put out a shot flyer, just so you know, on the route.
This is the 1032 podcast, where we interview experts in firearms and training with law enforcement, military, and competitive shooting backgrounds. All right, Brian, how's it going, man?
Good, buddy.
I'm glad to have you up here at our place.
We got ourselves some work today.
Yeah, a little bit of work climbing up and down the hills, up on this hillside, putting up some still targets.
That's good.
Hoping we can go out and do some long range.
Well, I'm only an hour away now, so it makes it easy.
I know. I got to make sure I got these cameras working to make sure to keep you off of here.
Good luck. I know where the cameras are.
Well, I have like 20 of them up there, so.
Oh, good. Well, it's fine.
All right. Well, Brian and I go way back. We worked for the same agency at one point, and we were on our SWAT team together.
Correct.
In fact, we were sniper partners at one point, right?
For a long time, actually.
Yeah.
For a number of years.
It seems like it was just the other day sometimes.
Well, I remember you and Ron call for service. It feels like it was 100 years ago now, but you guys were the ones that got me all spun up and talked into on the SWAT team when I was a boot rookie.
I don't remember that, but
we were on a call across from in McMillan, across from that big church there, just the other side of Eagle.
Yeah. Well, it was a good choice for you.
Checking a house.
That was a good choice.
So,
but yeah, Brian and I, we go way back. Like I said, we've been on several calls, several high risk calls together, SWAT team and sniper partners.
Mm-hmm.
We worked for different agencies, but on the same Metro SWAT team, which is a combined team with 3 different agencies.
Yeah.
And so we got to work together quite a bit and get some training in and go on some high risk calls.
Best years of my life at that time.
Later in this podcast, Brian's going to talk about officer involved shooting he was involved in. He's going to talk about lessons learned, things that occurred. He'll tell the story. But since I retired, what have you been up to? You've kind of you've moved the agency and you're
moved agencies. Yeah,
you're somewhere else.
Yeah. So I. Long story short, I got injured in the end of 2019, and then re-injured at the first part of
on-duty injury, right?
Yeah, I hurt my knee in a foot pursuit in a fight with a guy trying to break into a house. Had mom and little kids in it, and I tore the ACL and the patellar tendon off the tibia bone, and ended up having 3 surgeries in 11 months to try to repair it. And so, unfortunately, the city that I worked at for at the time decided, their human resources department decided I was a liability. So I wanted to go back to doing police work. So I've moved agencies now.
Okay, good. You're in an agency you like, though?
Yeah. I ended up in a town that's similar in size to when I started my career.
Yeah.
And it kind of has that same feel to it, and we're busy, and just like everywhere else, staffing is terrible, and we're always.
And I get the impression that you're counting down the days.
Perhaps. Yeah, I'm getting close to being done.
For some reason, when we get to a certain age, we kind of start counting down, right?
I know exactly what the number is. It's kind of like the baseball playoffs. I know what my magic number is. So I'm looking at the end of it, and I think when I get to that, I think I'm going to be done.
Yeah.
I've had a good career, and I'll be out nearly 25 years when I hit that point, and I think that's about a good point to do something different. So.
I'll tell you what, retirement's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Percy's nice.
Treats
us good.
Thanks. Rub it in.
He'll be there soon. But you kind of, when we got on SWAT and we were sniper partners, you've kind of taken that, I would say, kind of to that next level. I know you do some instructing and long-range shooting. And tell me a little bit about what you do with your classes.
So the sniper thing, when you and I got together and we started doing that thing, and that was all that dates back to 2012, right? Just going to put it out there.
It doesn't seem that long.
So we took that and I worked with a buddy of mine named Travis, and he was a Marine Corps 317 scout sniper, and he and I put some curriculum together, and we actually started working together and teaching for junior shooters program in the Valley. And so we actually took kids and developed a curriculum for kids, and we
get a little bit closer to the mic.
Started working with these kids and then take them to national PRS matches around the United States. Through that program, we actually took a pair of kids to a championship at the Sniper's Hide Cup some years ago. So it was fun. It was a good time. From that, we developed a curriculum for law enforcement and military, and we've put that curriculum together and started teaching to agencies locally, and then branched out to statewide and then other states, and even had
And that's geared towards law enforcement, right?
geared towards law enforcement. But we have had military in the classes. So we've had the U.S. Army in the classes.
I mean, it's not, you don't typically teach civilians to non-law enforcement, non-military.
No, that particular curriculum is law enforcement, military only. I won't share some of that stuff with the civilian world. That said,
Because it's not just shooting, correct? It's not just
There's
getting behind a
tactics
rifle and learning marksmanship.
Right. There's a lot more to it, and there's some things that I just don't want. I mean, you can get on YouTube, I guess, anymore and research anything you want. But I just don't want my name associated with some of that material being out in the civilian world at this point. Mm-hmm. That said, we took the curriculum and we developed a course, a couple of day course for patrol rifles, designated marksman for patrol. And so that's actually been a very popular course. I've taught that quite a bit. And then I took some of that and we developed curriculum for a civilian course, kind of geared up towards hunters more than it was for anything else, for the hunting world.
So do you teach hunters, long-range hunting?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've spread out to that and done some stuff with some precision black powder too. So some of these muzzle loaders that guys have that for short range, air quotes, short range weapons.
I was going to say, is that possible to do precision muzzleloader?
Oh yeah. So there's still, I mean, and I know guys, myself included, I actually shoot a muzzleloader in general season hunts.
What kind of distances are you getting with a muzzleloader?
I had a cow tag here last year, and shot the cow with this particular muzzleloader I'm shooting at 310 yards.
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so not bad for black powder.
It's not like the old just ball and
no
rod kind of thing, huh?
You still have to do all the same things. There's just a little bit better bullet and powder and ignition technology than there was at the time. Plus, if you put an optic on top of it, you put a scope.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good stuff.
And so are you going to start offering long-range rifle for like hunters on a regular basis? Do you intend to do something like that?
When we moved out of the valley and we moved away, that it got a little bit more difficult just by virtue of geography, really, more than anything else. I was doing some of that before in geography, so it's kind of slowed down a little bit. But as people come up and ask and different things, I'll certainly put some stuff together for folks, for sure.
Good. So do you have a way for people to get a hold of you to be able to put a course together?
Yeah, I do. I have some social media. You can find me. The company, the name of the company outfit is the Bitterroot Institute.
Bitterroot Institute?
Yeah, like Bitterroot Mountains here in Idaho. And you can find me on Bitterroot Reaper on Instagram. That's kind of the normal place people find me for the most part.
Bitterroot Reaper on Instagram?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I follow you, so.
Hey,
yeah. I figured, we've been friends for a while. I should follow you.
I think we follow each other, buddy. And all the other guys we worked with on the team at the time, we're all kind of on the same boat.
Well, so you've been doing sniper courses. You do some civilian long-range hunting. Mm-hmm. Have you shot any good big game lately?
So
in the last couple of years?
I kind of had the dream season last year, buddy. I drew a tag in a muzzleloader tag in Utah last year, in kind of a coveted unit.
For elk?
No, mule deer.
For mule deer? Okay.
Yeah, kind of a coveted unit in south central Utah, and shot a really nice buck with black powder down there last year.
Yeah, what kind of distance?
155.
155 yards?
Yeah, 155. And then I drew a mule deer tag in Montana, and then I hunted the eastern side of Montana, Missouri River Breaks. That was kind of a bucket list hunt for me. I'd been wanting to do that since I watched Guy Eastman do it in the 80s. And so I got to go do that, and I shot a pretty decent buck over there last year too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
So you also hunted Idaho?
Yeah, I hunt in Idaho. I generally get some cow tags and go hunt cow elk. But the unit that I live in is tough because it's a 2-point unit during the general season, and drawing the tag for a big buck unit is like less than 1% draw. So,
before COVID, it wasn't that big a deal.
And
now it seems like it's really tough.
So, and I put in for a bunch of muzzleloader hunts. We'll see what happens this year. I put in a couple of hunts in some other parts of the state, and
Is it still June the 5th, the last day for the draw hunts?
Yeah, what's that today? Tomorrow? I think that's tomorrow, isn't it?
I guess I better get after it.
Yeah, that's tomorrow, buddy.
I
Last
guess
day's
tomorrow, midnight
Yeah,
tomorrow.
midnight tomorrow. So yeah, I put in for some. We'll see what I draw. We'll see what I draw.
Yeah.
Who knows? I've got all my points, and I've kind of got this schedule of things. This plan, master plan for drawing in different states, and so I've got points kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
It's just my thing.
Well, that's awesome. I think it's great to see that you've taken the long range and the sniper stuff, I would say to that next level. When we were on the team together, I'd gone to several different schools and classes and that were sniper related, even did some teaching for the State Department over in Pakistan, as an instructor there. But I don't think I've taken it to the level that you're at, so that's good to see.
It's fun. It's been a good time. And then I retired from our team down there after my injury, and my new agency has dusted me off, as it were, and has put me back in service. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Well, with all the work we did, I guess I'm going to have to brush up on some long range.
Yeah, we're going to have to get some.
Right. I've done pretty good over the last. I've shot an elk every year for the last 5 years.
You shot pretty good even back in the day, bud.
Yeah.
So.
The closest one I shot was 100 yards, and then my furthest, I got a 550 and a 667.
That's a poke. 667. That's a poke for
Yeah.
sure, and that's a fair ways out there. And then the hunting spear, everybody has their thing, right? I'm not gonna poke holes in everybody's stuff, but I think for the average guy out there that's got decent equipment, I think that 600-yard mark is kind of about the limit for most guys with decent equipment. I think.
Well, I guess we both know, it's for most of us. Once you got your zero, right? Everybody has ballistic apps nowadays.
Sure.
Everybody knows their drop and their come ups, that kind of stuff. Then after that, it's the wind.
The
right?
wind is the problem,
Wind is the challenge.
and that's one of the things we focus a ton on when I teach these classes is the wind. And I have some formulas and stuff, some cheats, as it were, cheat codes for folks to do that. But the biggest thing is, it goes back to the archery folks. The archery hunters, they're only shooting what, 30, 40, 50, 60 yards. Guys that are really good maybe push that to 70 yards on game. But they're also shooting all the time. Those guys go out in their backyard or wherever the case may be, and they're putting arrows down range all the time to maintain that. And my argument has been, in the precision hunting realm, you have to do the same thing. You have to go out and put rounds down range regularly in order to maintain that and understand the gun, understand your ballistics, make sure that you have the environmentals correct. Everything is perfect, because if you're asking your rifle to shoot past 400 yards, that's when ballistic coefficient and gravity and wind and drag and all these different things and humidity start taking effect of the bullet, and that's when things start getting more difficult. And if you don't know what your rifle is doing, and you don't have the practice to do that, you have no business pressing the trigger.
Yeah,
on
you
an
got to know
animal
how to
those
use your
distances.
equipment for sure.
For sure.
But I had a friend of mine who used to be a hunting guide, and he used to tell me that he thought it was unethical for me to shoot beyond like 300 yards. And I was like, so I asked him, I go, so how do you prepare, or how did you prepare guys to go shoot an elk when you're guiding? I go, do you just go out and zero your rifle like, 1.5, 2 inches high at 100 yards, and you're like, hey, we're good to go?
Hope for the best.
And hope, yeah. And I go, that's unethical. I go, because you're guessing, your hold, right?
I'm with 100%
Right.
with you.
You're guessing the distance, because probably doesn't have a
Right.
rangefinder. I go, I'm not guessing my hold. I'm not guessing my distance, because I have a rangefinder. I know my ballistic apps are going to tell me, or my Kestrel is going to tell me my come-ups on my scope. The only thing I'm having to guess is the wind. And if I go out and practice, I can get a pretty good estimate on the wind. And I go, I think you're the way we used to do things old school, right? That was more unethical if you think about it, because we're guessing everything, right?
Think about this for a minute. I'll just give you an example. I had a rifle antelope tag in Idaho, 2020, COVID year, and I shot an antelope buck at 326 yards. 326 yards. Not, that's a fair poke for a lot of people, right? But in yours and my spear, it's not that far. The difference was, it was a 26 mile an hour full value wind, so it was right to left 90 degrees on me. 26 miles an hour at 326 yards was 10 inches.
That's a lot.
It pushed the bullet 10 inches from my barrel, leaving the barrel, to impact with that. So I had to basically steer that rifle into the wind.
So you're telling me you missed?
Negative. No. Although it was a perfect boiler, perfect hit right in the Boilermaker, but he still run 60, 70 yards. So that's just what those things do.
Yeah.
But again, 10 inches of wind at 326 yards. If you're not training, if you don't know what your rifle and what those numbers are, it's a miss for most people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about training. One of the things for years I'd go out and shoot. I'm a big handgun shooter, and I shoot USPSA as often as I can. And for years I used to be that guy that I just go out, about twice a month. I'd go out and shoot about 300 to 400 rounds at one sitting, sometimes 500 rounds, and then maybe dry fire every now and then. And and I'm going, man, how come these guys are just they're getting better and better, and I'm just kind of stagnant. I'm just I've leveled out, not getting any better, And then I had an instructor one day. He goes, in order to get to the level that you want to get to, he goes, you got to treat this like any other athletic sport. He goes, think about any athletic sport that you've ever done in your life. He goes, how often did you go practice little league baseball or basketball or whatever, as a kid? Like, well, yeah, we would practice, 4 or 5 days a week, and then you'd have games on the weekends. He's like, well, if you want to be good with that pistol, you need to be dry firing every single day. You need to be going to the range weekly.
Agreed.
And shooting a couple matches every month. And
it doesn't change anything with precision rifle. It's the same thing. I shoot weekly, whether I make the time to go out and put some round. And training is training, right? Good training in, good results out. I don't have to go shoot 30, 40, 50, 60 rounds to get good training.
Yeah.
I need to go put something together that's going to be meaningful and get what I need done at that particular juncture. And if it's 10 rounds, it's 10 rounds.
Yeah. And for law enforcement, marksman or sniper, you can do a lot of things. Just dry fire, just practice and get into position. Use a timer, have the timer go off, get your stuff out of the trunk, run and get into a position and dry fire on a target, right?
Dry fire is crucial. I don't care what you're doing, with the exception of a bow, because you blow your bow up, but you still got to pull even archery guys, pull your bow up and go through the motions as if it's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's, dry fire is very important.
Well, I think we've hit hunting. We're kind of almost like doing a hunting podcast, which I don't mind. We could, we both know we could sit and talk hunting stories
for sure, and that's
all night long.
And you and I both, as we gotten older, that's just where our passion. We've gone back to what we, go and take our training and our expertise, and then we've gone back.
Yeah,
to that.
what I like about it, I'm sure just like you, right? I grew up in a small town. My dad was a big outdoors guy. I used to go hunting, and that's my dad introduced me to that. And then kind of got into law enforcement, got kind of busy, didn't hunt as often.
Yep.
But I was still learning some shooting skills, especially when I got on sniper teams or going to sniper schools. And then the last half of my career started hunting a little bit more.
And more.
Now I'm hunting. Now I never skip a season now.
Yeah.
And so I'm able to use those same skills I used in law enforcement and things I learned as a kid hunting.
That sounds awful familiar.
Yeah, it's weird how that seems to be pretty a
common theme throughout our career paths, right? Or throughout our profession.
In our profession, you hear that a lot. A lot of guys with that same kind of background, small town guys who grew up doing a lot of outdoor stuff with their families and shooting as a kid. Yeah,
we hunted. We had a ranch. We hunted the ranch. That's what we did.
I never grew up on a ranch, but my dad made me go to work on one.
That's real work there.
Feeding cattle, so I didn't build fences and do all the hard stuff, but
still,
yeah. Anyway, let's get back to the law enforcement stuff.
Let's do it.
You were involved in an OIS or officer involved shooting back in the day.
I was,
and for a while, when I started doing these podcasts, your name come up. Somebody goes, "Hey, you need to talk to Brian about his OIS," and I'm like, "Man, I don't remember him being. Which one was that?" I know we've been a lot of incidents together that were high-risk incidents, but they were talking about a specific shooting, and I'm just like, man, I don't remember that. And then when we met up this morning, and we're talking before hiking the mountain, I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember.
I do remember.
In fact, I remember talking to you right after it happened, because when that call come out, and I was listening to it, and the more we start talking about it, I start getting these memories, and I remember it going on, and I was like, I better start heading that direction. And then by the time I got there, it was over with, and I met you out in the driveway.
Yeah, I was standing in the driveway.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. Well, go ahead and tell us how your day started that day,
So
or leading up to it.
This was, just to kind of give a point of reference, because it's kind of hard to forget. This was Mother's Day 2007. I was working weekend graveyards, so this would have been, it was a Sunday, Mother's Day, would have been my Friday. Came to work, we did what we did. We ended up at a call, or I ended up at a child abuse call, not far from the area of this particular where we got involved in the shooting. And I was working this child abuse call to the point where we actually had to call a detective out. And the detective I called out was a friend of mine. And we ended up taking these kids into imminent danger custody. We had put them into foster care that night as we were working through this case. And as we're working through this and trying to get health and welfare and all the key pieces, as you know, involved to take care of this particular thing, I'm listening to this call for service for a suicidal subject coming out. And I'm listening to everybody kind of responding to it. And I'll tell you this, but it may be hard for listeners to understand, but you just get this innate sixth sense that something's not right. You can hear it in your partner's voices, guys you've worked with now for years. You can kind of hear things. It's just something's wrong with
Yeah, you
what's
can
going
just
on.
kind of hear,
You can hear it.
when officers are talking, you can hear their stress level.
Stress,
start to go up.
and maybe that's what it is. We understand it. Maybe it's their stress level. You could just hear something in the octave of their voice that's off. And so I was talking to my detective partner, and I go, I think I better go to this call and see what's up. At the time, I was on the SWAT team, and we were, had been on the team for a while. I kind of, obviously we have these skill sets. If things go sideways, we have the tools and equipment and some of the stuff to be there. So just like you, I always responded to those kind of calls when people sounded weird on the air, right? So I go to this thing, and I get a hold of the supervisor that was on duty at the time, and I asked him, I go, hey, you good? And he's like, no, we've got a thing, and we need you, and if you can get here, that would be great. Well, I'm already on my way. And it was like 6 blocks from where I was at. 5 minutes, if that, from point A to point B. And I get there, and you're good if I don't give out names of supervisors and stuff.
Oh, yeah, no.
Perfect. I get there, and I'm talking to this supervisor, and he lays out the case for me. What they had was they had a person, a male subject, that had gone into a house and been allowed entry from what we gathered, but he was violating a no contact order by being in the residence. So that was kind of the first thing. The second thing that occurred, that there was an argument between, which is now former spouses and children, et cetera, where the suspect had presented a knife and threatened the family with a knife. And then the family notified us that he was suicidal, or notified the supervisor he was suicidal and possibly had hurt himself.
So it was a domestic / suicidal person.
Suicidal person, right? And we had an aggravated assault with the knife. So we have a felony crime. We have a suicidal subject. And at the time, our SOP, our standard operating procedure for doing those things, if SWAT wasn't available or SWAT wouldn't come out to the call, which happened frequently, we just handled them ourselves. We would take care of business. And so we did. And what we ended up doing was we ended up forming up a team of 4 officers, or 3 officers and this supervisor, and we made entry into this house to do 2 things. One, to render aid to this person if they had indeed hurt themselves, and B, our goal was to take this person into custody for this felony crime that occurred with the family. With victim, we had all the key pieces, so that was what the goal was. So we had everything, all the key pieces, paramedics were staged, the whole 9 yards. And we went into the house, and the supervisor directed us to go immediately to the room where we knew the suspect was holed up in, based on the information that he got from the family. So a couple of things there. I mean, obviously, you and I in our world, we don't bypass doors. We could have cleared the whole house, but the supervisor felt that there was enough information that we could do basically just that. So we did. The team that I had with me at the time, they brought in a shield and some other stuff, and with the equipment. So I had brought my SWAT rifle in with me to clear this thing, because he is armed with a knife.
So you were the only SWAT guy there. Everybody else was regular patrol, right?
Yeah, regular patrol guys. And the supervisor I had was a canine handler. So, I mean, he had some He had some training and some experience and some stuff too, but the other patrol guys were fairly new, young in their careers, etc. And so I led the way down this hallway, got to the door, this room. It was at the end of this. So we went down the hallway of the bedrooms, kind of your typical ranch-style house, right? Go down the end of this hallway, and it was the last bedroom on the left. And it was a corner-fed room, so the door opened on a corner of the room and opened inward, and it opened from right to left. And then the room kind of opened in from right to left. It's kind of opened back and away from us, away from that door. So I went in, opened the door, and as soon as I opened the door and I made entry, I actually was tripped up by objects, by unknown things in this room. It was dark, obviously, it's nighttime. And it turned out to be the box springs and the mattress were on the floor. They weren't in a bed frame. They were resting on the floor. And this will become important later. So as I did so, I can't move further down this long wall. And as you know, through our SWAT career, et cetera, I always took the hard corner. So as soon as the door came open, I immediately turned right to run that wall and clear that section of it, and I couldn't go anywhere. So the problem now becomes is everybody else that's coming into the bedroom behind me is now basically kind of running into me. So I'm having to move over to make room for everybody. And as this is happening, I'm finding objects that are lined up in the way in front of this bed off to my left. They basically go all the way to the wall. I don't know what these objects are. It's just stuff, and I can't move around it. I'm stuck. So in effect, what had happened was we'd been led into this kill box for all intents and purposes, and I had nowhere to go. So mind you, this all is happening at the speed of light, right? I mean, these are all these things I'm processing, but this is happening very quickly. And so what happens next is the suspect is apparently covered up in the bed underneath a bunch of blankets and different stuff, and not to the point in the dark, and even with a rifle light, it's hard to see what this is. And he immediately sits up in the bed with approximately 18-inch butcher knife of some kind.
So he's laying on his back with the covers over.
Yeah, he's laying somehow with the covers over him, but he immediately sits straight up with this knife in his right hand, and is coming up out of the bed at me. Obviously, I've got a rifle light on. I give the suspect some commands, doesn't listen to him, and it's, at that particular juncture, it's safety finger fire. I mean, I'm already in a low ready position, and so I came from low ready to up. I was in the sights, had good sight acquisition. At the time, we didn't have red dots yet. We still were running iron sights on a carry handle.
So you're ancient then.
Yes. Yeah. And so, the first round goes in, and it's slow motion. I don't know how to describe it, but the events are fast, slow. Safety finger fire, and the round goes off, and there's two things. The time slowed down, but the noise was excruciating. The bark of the rifle was deafening.
So you didn't have the auditory exclusion that you hear some people talk about?
I did not. I can tell you for sure how many rounds I fired because I heard every single one of them.
Your ears were ringing?
Oh, jeez. To this day, there's some hearing damage from some of that. And so first round goes in, and the suspect is still holding a knife up in the air, looking at me. And I talked to the investigators. I said, he's looking at me, but he's looking through me with that 1,000-yard stare. I want to impale you with this knife in my hand kind of look, right? Not something we see all that often, but it was clear. And all he did was look down at that wound. I see the hole go in. The hole developed from the rifle round. I see him look down at it, and in this slow motion, you can just see it start to expel his blood from his chest cavity. And then he starts coming at us again, so his time now speeds up. And so he continues to come after me with this thing, and I basically I'll step back in time a little bit to our academy training, some different stuff. And SWAT, we had some different training with a little more high speed, but you fall back in the love of your training, right?
Sure.
When you get into a shooting with somebody, we were trained to stop the threat. And every time we went to the range of the academy, we would fire one round, and we would cover down, look around, and holster. Ready on the left, ready on the right, the line is ready, one round, center mass, and up, and we would shoot. And that's how we trained. So unfortunately at the time, I had been on the SWAT team a while, but not to the point where I had overcome that training scar. So guess what I did? I fired one round. I'm like, in my little mind, I was like, oh, this is going to be plenty good, right? This is a rifle. This is about 4 feet. Is all this was. This is going to be plenty good. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. So then there's that moment of, uh-oh, this isn't good. And that's not what went through my mind. There was some bad words involved in that, but you can figure out what they are. And I just basically rocked, the gun was in my shoulder. I rocked it right back up into a high ready and looked over the top of the sights and just continued to pull the trigger until it stopped.
So you fired one shot, and he continued moving towards you.
Continued moving towards me. After he looked down at the wound
And
looked back up, he continued moving towards me.
that first shot was in his chest.
Yeah, center mass, right in the brisket, right between both lungs and would have been to the right of his heart.
And so you were shooting a 223 caliber.
Yep.
And
64 grain gold dot.
And then so after your first round, he continued to come at you, and you continued to fire. How many rounds did you fire after that?
Two more.
2 more?
Yep, 2 more from that. And they were immediate. Those two finally slowed him down to the point where he crumpled up and rolled off the bed, and he was now face down and non-responsive. So, and then it's a span of what, a second and a half, maybe 2 seconds. I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, you tell this story over the course of 5-10 minutes, and it's really like
but it's
1.5, 2 seconds.
It's so fast. I mean, it just time sped was normal, and then it sped up, and then it slowed down, and then time sped up again, and then you go through that phase of it, right? Well, the next thing I see, I hear people screaming next to me. The next thing I see is the light switch, or the lights in the bedroom come on, and the supervisor that was kind of behind all this is moving from my right to my left over the bed, and has now got a gun pointed at the suspect, as I've got a gun pointed at the suspect, a rifle and a handgun, giving him commands. So basically, at this particular juncture, like, hey man, we want to help you, want to get you medical help, but you got to show us your hands, this, that, and the other. And so we kind of went through that phase. No response. And the supervisor says, I'm going to go hands on. I'm like, cool, bro, I got you. So he goes to hands on with him to clear that knife out of his hand and get him in handcuffs, as I'm basically pointed in, looking down the sights at him to make sure he doesn't continue to want to fight with us. Once he was in handcuffs, medics were summoned, and they came in and they started working on him. In that particular juncture, we started to have to make some decisions as to what we're going to do. It was interesting because it was at that moment I could look around at the room, and I could see exactly, because the light's on, I could see exactly what was done to the room. So the bed had been taken off the bed frame, and I don't know where the bed frame was. I'm sure it was in that mess someplace. But everything in that room had been moved up and to my left of the bed all the way to the wall. So from the corner of the bed, my left side, from the corner of that box springs and mattress, all the way to the wall was stuff, a mat, or like a dresser and clothing hampers and anything that you would find in
it wasn't a well-kept home. It was.
No, he'd moved it. So everything that was in there had been moved from its normal places and staged off the corner of that bed. So I had 3 feet to move around in.
You think he was creating a barricade of some sorts? Or?
Oh yeah, he had created what we considered a kill box. Basically, his goal was to fight it out with us. Who knows? What? I didn't have the opportunity to interview him, but who knows what his mental state was? But I do know that a neighboring police agency had contacted this same suspect a few weeks prior, in similar circumstances, minus the knife, and they ended up using a beanbag gun to get him under control.
So he had a couple other run-ins with law enforcement, or at least one other one.
Right. And at the time I hadn't put the name together, because the name that came out on the call was different than the name that we knew this suspect as, because he was known to us. But the names were similar, but he had an alias, and so his real name came out, not the alias that we knew him by. And so we really hadn't put all of this together until later that night. And it became abundantly clear who this actually was. So it was known to us, was a known officer safety issue.
When you started firing, you mentioned something about there was a lot of screaming. Who was the screaming?
One of the other officers, one of the young officers was there. Obviously, wasn't prepared for that, and it happens. It was that person's reaction, no big deal. Whatever.
Yeah. And where was the family at this time?
The family was outside and across the street my understanding was with other officers that had responded to the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then, so the shooting happens. Paramedics get there. They start treating the suspect. And then what happens after that?
So at this particular juncture, I talked to the supervisor that was there, and we obviously had failed to clear that house because we made decisions to go directly to that problem, the source of that problem, instead of ensure that the house was secure. And so we have paramedics in there, we have other people around us, and we have done nothing to ensure that this house is safe for everybody that's in there right now. Mm-hmm. So I turned around and took my gear, and I went and cleared every space of that house that we had missed to ensure that was safe for them to be in.
And then what kind of procedures, what happened? Because now it becomes a crime scene at that point, right? So then what happens after that?
So this was interesting. This was the very first officer-involved shooting that the city had with their officers as the primary. I mean, there have been other shootings in the city, but this is the first one that involved one of us.
Yeah.
The chief was relatively new at the time. And just procedurally, it was just some of that stuff was in its, I don't want to say that it's infancy, but it wasn't well rehearsed yet, I guess. And so they took us, took the four of us out of there, and they had us stand in the driveway of an adjacent residence. Mm-hmm. And it was like looking at a game of Foursquare. We each have one of the Foursquare cutouts that we're standing in and looking at each other, but we can't talk to each other because you don't want the story to get misconstrued. You don't want, you want to make sure there's the integrity of this investigation is maintained, right? Yeah. And it's the most awkward thing ever. Because we're all standing there in this little piece of concrete, each one in our little section, and we're all looking at each other, and we're like, okay, no, now what?
Yeah.
And then you showed up, and Kevin showed up,
yeah.
Other guys that were on the team with us at the time, right? There's some guys started showing up and checking on me, which, that's what we did for each other, right? And so that was good for me.
Yeah, we were like, hey, what'd Brian do this time?
Yeah, now what? You guys weren't the only ones that thought that. So, and so from there, they took us to a hotel room, and then that's when we started taking off our gear, and all of our clothing and everything else became evidence.
Tell us a little bit about that process. Why did they take you to the hotel?
Yep. So they actually took my rifle first. They're on scene as soon as I had it. So I was.
And we say we're talking about supervisors, right?
Well, the
protocol.
Detectives, those running the investigation, right?
Yeah. So now it becomes an investigation into you and what you did.
Right.
So now they take you just to a off-site location, which is typically a hotel.
Right.
And
it's a secure facility because nobody really knows where it is, and so there's a block of rooms that are reserved specifically for these types of incidents by the task force that runs these investigations.
Called the CITF, right?
Correct.
Critical Incident Task Force.
Right.
And they're the investigating team who investigates critical incidents or officer-involved shootings, and it's basically detectives from multiple agencies in the valley who come together as one, right?
Including the state. Right,
Yeah.
And so the state throws their hat in the ring on some of these things and helps out too. So the first thing I was assigned an escort officer. One of the Boise City guys rolled up and took me on, and put me in the car with him. So I'm now in a safe, secure environment, right? I've got an escort. I'm in a car. Nobody can talk to me. The media, I'm away from the media. I'm away from the family, all these different things. And then that's when they start taking your stuff. So they took my rifle first. Fortunately, they let me stay armed with my handgun and my vest and my stuff until we got to the hotel. But they did take my rifle from me then. And then they transported me down to that hotel. From there, you get booked in there and you're there with your escort officer for the time being. And then,
what's an escort officer, for those who don't know?
It's basically your security detail. You're assigned an officer, somebody from one of the agencies that are partnering with that critical incident task force to basically be your security, be your left arm, as it were, until you're at the hotel in a secure location, and in order to make sure that it's a traumatic event, right? So people as a whole, we are not wired to kill one another. We're just not wired that way. I mean, it happens. It happens frequently, but as a species, that's not what we're wired to do. So it could be a traumatic event for many people, and they want to make sure that we're in a good headspace, that we're doing okay mental health wise, right? That we're doing those things, answer any questions that we may have that are within their realm to answer, and then they transport us, those that are involved, to that hotel in a marked car.
Yeah. And so then once you were there, then you wait for 30 minutes to an hour, however long it takes the detectives to get there. Mm-hmm. And then what do they do once they're there?
So then they start taking, this is the moment that you start to feel like a suspect, because now they come in and they take your gear from you. So they take your clothing, they take your vest, they take anything that you're wearing, they take your duty belt, your firearm, everything from you, basically. And I'm now standing in my skivvies, pretty much, like a T-shirt and underwear now. And you don't have any clothing with you, because you're not expecting this, right? So you literally you are completely exposed. I mean, and under the microscope.
Were you working out at the time?
Thank God. But there's all, your mama says change your underwear every day. Well, that's why. So I'm there, and then the very next thing to come in is paramedics and a phlebotomist. So
and what's a phlebotomist do?
They take your blood. Right.
So why do they take your blood?
They take a blood and urine sample. They do that to ensure that you're not under the influence of anything that you shouldn't be while you're working. It's really for our protection, right? Because we're not. But it's to show the world that we're not.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing, but it's tough because I go back to I'm standing in a black moisture wicking T-shirt and boxer shorts.
Yeah.
And so a couple of dudes come in and they have to take a urine sample, and they have to take it. I mean, they're there when you go into the bathroom and you have to pee into a cup when they watch.
Yeah.
And then they take your blood and they do a bunch of different things, right? It's a kind of a surreal moment if you've never done it before. You're like, okay, I guess I am a suspect, right? So then you do that, and then at that particular juncture, that's when I had a friend come. One of our SWAT guys came and brought me a bunch of his clothes, so I actually had some clothing to wear. The funny part of it was that he was like 6'3", and I'm, well, not 6'3". I'm like 5'10" on a good day, and he's like just bigger than me, and so I'm swimming in these clothes, and it's all SWAT gear. It's the 511 stuff we were wearing at the time, right? I didn't have a belt, so I'm trying to roll them up. It was hysterical, dude. I mean, just.
I think nowadays that you can request a family member or somebody to bring you some clothing.
Yeah, it wasn't the case at the time, right? So, again, that task force, some of that stuff, it wasn't in an infancy, but it was certainly being refined and improving and making changes and doing some stuff. And this was just another example of that. I'm not the only one. Yeah. But now, like you said, you have the ability to get some clothing and stuff, so you're not standing around in boxer shorts and a T-shirt, right, with everybody looking at you. So that was kind of that, as far as some of that went.
So do they question you at this time for an investigation after they take all your gear?
Well, they wanted to, and which was the standard procedure at the time, but I was a force science instructor and PPCT and some different things, and myself and the guys that I taught with, we believed in that science. And that science says that when you have some sort of a
critical incident,
traumatic event, right? You have this traumatic event. We'll use that terminology because it's not just related to cops, but you have this traumatic event. You need a 24 to 48 hour sleep cycle in order to actually remember more clearly what happened. Our brains do not are not wired to think in real time. We don't. It's not like a VCR or sorry, folks, VCR. It's not like a
People don't even know what that is.
I know. It's not like a digital recording where it's linear. Right? You jump on YouTube and you watch this linear recording of what happened. Our mind thinks in like a computer in ones and zeros in packets. And so these little packets become more clear as time goes on, and so you can actually build more of a linear memory of that incident, more akin to an ancient cartoon when they would actually like flip through the pages and the cartoon would move, and they would have to draw each
That's
picture.
ancient?
Yeah, I mean,
I had a kid show me that just the other day. I thought that was...
But each one of each one of those pictures had to be drawn, right, and to show each particular movement. That's how our brain works. And so the more of those pictures, the more of those pages of that flipboard cartoon that you have in your brain, the more of the memory you're going to have. And the science has shown that sleep cycle is tremendous in rebuilding that.
So
memory.
The more rest that you have, or that 24 or 48 hour sleep cycle, allows your brain to rest, which allows you to remember more detail. Correct.
Yeah, remembers more detail, and you get more of those packets, more of those pieces, bits and pieces to make a clear picture. To the point where we do the same thing now with victims of critical types of incidents, right? When they have a traumatic experience on a very violent domestic battery or whatever the case may be, we get better information the next day. We also get better pictures of bruises and some different things. So, we take our initial statement, but usually we'll have a detective or somebody go out and take another statement the following day after we get some sleep, we get some rest with these victims, et cetera. It's the same thing. So I made the decision that I wasn't going to talk to the investigators until after I'd had a sleep cycle, which was controversial.
Yeah, that didn't go over very well with your administration and investigators at the time?
The investigators were okay with it. They understood where we were coming from because the science was there. The administrator, the chief of police we had at the time, was unhappy to the point he was yelling and screaming at my attorney out in the hallway, and I could hear him outside the door. Made for
screaming, huh?
Yeah, he was not happy.
Yeah, that's not good.
No,
but that just increases the stress level.
The stress level, right? And this is as stressful as enough as it is, right? Because at this particular juncture, I've committed a homicide.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's a difference between homicide and murder, right? But I have committed a homicide, and it has to be investigated as a crime until it's not. That's the stressful thing.
People don't realize homicide's really just the
intentional killing of another human being.
Yeah, by another person.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it's justified or not justified. It's just the act. Basically, right?
And so they have to have this investigation done, right? And so it's a stressful thing. I don't. The situation that we were put in that caused this whole thing, I mean, it is what it is, right? We do our jobs. We did our jobs well. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking that went on and looked at that. And I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of things that came as a result of that shooting in terms of the honest look into our tactics and what we did that changed the way we operated, not just as an agency, but in the Valley. The way we did things completely changed as a result of that, and for the better, right? So we need to. The best part about that whole thing was we were able to take that incident and look at that as a whole, all of us, and look in the mirror and say, are there things that we can do better? And the answer was yes, for sure. Were we wrong? No, not with the information, the training, and the standard operating procedures we held at the time. But if we want to get better,
that incident made us change. Right?
Absolutely.
Because I remember having several discussions in training where we talked about your incident when you weren't there. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's all good, right? But it did a good. The outcome was the outcome.
But yeah,
for you guys in
it changed policies. It
Absolutely.
changed our tactics. It's just like, hey, maybe we should do this or maybe we shouldn't do that. But it changed the way we responded to those types of incidents.
And I don't regret what we did and how we did it because that's how we did it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to do that today? No, absolutely not. We're going to change the way that we've changed the way completely how we're going to handle that call as a result of that.
Well, we constantly evolve, right? We evolve constantly with every call that we go on. We have to. That's why debriefs are good.
Well, and if you
just like talking here today, hopefully, other guys that are listening to this that are still out there working can.
Right. And I'm sure there's some guys out there going, I would have never done that way. And I get it. I mean, I do understand that sentiment. I do, because we wouldn't do that today either. But it was the information and how our training and how we worked at the time. So, and if we can't look in the mirror and be honest about some stuff and figure out what the mistake, or not mistake, but figure out what we did and how we can make it better, we are either ignorant or we are just arrogant. Mm-hmm. It's one of the two things. You're either ignorant or you're arrogant. Because if you can't look in the mirror and actually figure out how you do stuff better, you're either one of those two things, period. And so we did. And you were included in that, right? Yeah. Everybody had conversations about that particular shooting at the time.
Sure.
As to the tactics and were we doing the right thing? And I mean, you name it.
But we do that with every incident,
absolutely.
Right? Whether it's high risk or...
And I didn't take that stuff personal because looking at it, again, the honest look at it, were we wrong? No. Obviously, I was exonerated on that, right? I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, like you say, it's with the training and the way we're doing things at the time.
At the time. And again, we evolved and we got better as a result of that. And I think so that's a positive that comes out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So, that's what...
So going back to the incident, I know you said you had no auditory exclusion, which
I did not.
Especially when you read things from Force Science, things like that, they talk about a lot of people have auditory exclusion. They don't hear, and what that means is basically your hearing shuts down or you don't hear the gunshots.
Right.
Did you see your sights at all? I heard
Yes.
you say you looked over your sights.
So the first round I was in the sights for sure. And again, we had to carry handle, right?
So were you focused on your sights, right? So traditionally we talk about, hey, you got to see that front sight super clear. If you got serrations, like a lot of handguns will have serrations on on the front sight. Mm-hmm. People say, hey, you should see those serrations. But over the last several years, we've gone over to, hey, be target focused. You're seeing your sights, but you're looking through your sights, being target focused.
It was going to be more of that because I shoot with two eyes open anyway.
Yeah. So you were indexing your sights,
mm-hmm.
indexing your rifle on the target. You were looking through them.
Yep.
You could see them, but probably a little bit blurred. But the suspect was more in focus.
I had good sight acquisition for sure, or I had target acquisition, and I could see the sights. I mean, the AR front sight, front post is pretty unique, right?
Sure.
If anybody's seen one, they know what I'm talking about. And I could see that, but I was also looking at the suspect. The second two rounds, not in the sights. I'm looking over for sure, 100% looking over the top of them.
But you still had an index, right? You're still lining up.
Yeah.
The top of the sights, right?
Correct.
And then what else was I going to ask you about that? Was there anything else? When you said, I know what it was. When you said you saw the first shot, things kind of slowed down for just a split second.
Yes.
And you saw the impact of the round. Is that?
I don't see the impact of the round, but I saw the dark circle. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget it. I mean, I saw the dark circle, and you know what it is, right? It's
blood. Blood coming out.
Right?
Yeah.
But in that moment, it's just a dark hole. Mm-hmm. And then he looks down at it and looks back up at me, and there was that moment of, oh no, this isn't good.
Yeah.
It didn't. The training that we had at the time from the academy, and I was a ways out of the academy at that point, right? But still, I was fairly new to the team within a year, so I had some pretty good training with the SWAT team. But
it was still early on. You were still early on. You were a newer SWAT team member,
and it hadn't taken over my training, right? That muscle memory hadn't developed itself completely yet, and so I still went back to that one round center mass. The line is ready, and up. And everybody draws and fires their one round, and everybody comes back to a safety circle, and they cover down, they look around over their shoulders and do all these different things, and holster, right? I mean, and that's what we did. Training scars.
Yeah. It's
not how we train anymore. We don't teach those things at the academy. I mean, I taught at the academy for a number of years before I moved on. And we've completely changed the way we teach our new guys so that they're more ready for these types of incidents.
Yeah. Did you have any other things happen? So some things like auditory exclusion, things kind of slowed down for you for a split second. Did you get the dry mouth? Did you?
No, and in fact, I really didn't get. It was very fast. I mean, it was very fast. I'm talking less than less than 3 seconds, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
From the time that I made entry in the door and got stuck to the time that the last round was fired, right? It was very fast. I really didn't in my mind didn't get a lot of tunnel vision either, because I was seeing what was going on around me. I could see the stuff blocking my way. I could see the supervisor come in when the light comes on. I could see him coming in off to my right. I'm focused on the bad thing for sure, but I'm seeing what's going on around me. So, and I go back to training on that one. I trained a lot. I did a lot of defensive tactic stuff. I did a lot of jiu-jitsu and other things at the time. I was on the team. I was shooting with you guys all the time. So,
So leading up to it, you felt like your training was
yeah,
adequate for the time?
it was in terms of my expectation of what was going on. It didn't. Let me preface this by saying it sucked. This whole thing sucked, right? But it didn't surprise me. I wasn't like shocked that this person came out from underneath the covers and sat up and wanted to kill me.
Yeah, one of the things that always drives me nuts is when I hear an officer say, they're involved in the shooting, and afterwards they're like, I'm so shocked that I was involved in the shooting. I'm surprised that happened to me.
No.
And I'm like, dude, your first clue is you wear body armor and you have a gun on when you go to work. That should be your first
That's your
clue.
first
So it
thing.
should never be a
Yeah.
surprise. You should be expecting it every day you go to work.
And from the defensive tactics spear, we trained this kind of thing. I call it a flashlight picture, right? And it's like these little daydreams that you have, these little flashlights. If this happens, I'm going to do that. If this happens, I'm going to do that. For example, every time I went to the county jail with a suspect, I went down to the county jail, I dropped my suspect up, got him booked in, this, that, and the other. From the time I left the jail and got on the highway back to my city, I pretended I was in a pursuit. And so I'd put the mic in my lap. I wasn't driving like an a-hole, but I was driving as if I was following a vehicle and I was calling the pursuit out.
You're rehearsing.
I was rehearsing. And I did that every time I came back from the jail. So every time I got in the pursuit, dude, it was like, the mic goes in my lap and I'm just going to drive and I'm talking to the dispatch and I'm doing what I do. And it was no big deal. This incident was no different. It's not like I expected this guy to come out after me with a knife, but it was a possibility, and I knew that going into it. And so as soon as I saw it, it was like, okay, safety finger fire, I know how to deal with this. We gave him commands, right? I gave him the opportunity to drop it. He did not. I didn't give him long. I didn't give him a lot of time to do it, but I at least made the attempt to put those commands out there, and it was on audio because I had an audio tape recorder running at the time.
Yeah.
Like literally.
I almost busted up laughing when he said the tape recorder.
Tape recorder. So, but we had that thing running at the time, and that's that audio is saved somewhere forever. Mm-hmm. So it didn't shock me. I didn't go black.
Yeah.
I was, mentally prepared to deal with that
So
problem.
do you feel like later in your career, when you were still working in the Valley, did you feel like the training got better and better? Did we
100%? Yeah, 100%. And we advanced as a result of those incidents, not just mine, but all of the ones that we'd had, right? Were any type of critical incident, whether it was a shooting or not, every time we had something bad happen to us, the collective us, we got better, and we got better training, and we incorporated those things into it. The handgun training that you and I have been doing, quite frequently with some of the schools in our area has transitioned to academy. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I was kind of helping run that Meridian, their academy and whatnot. I was helping run that, and we incorporated that program into the academy. So new cadets were getting that that training, and I think it's great. I'm incorporating that into my current agency. We're moving forward with that. I just done with firearms training with those guys, and they loved it. It was.
So how about the aftermath? You go home, you just shot and killed somebody.
Mm-hmm. Interesting thing. Life lessons learned. So I called my wife from the Foursquare. We were playing Foursquare, right, in the concrete. I called my wife. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna be late, so don't wait up. I know you got to go to school and this and that there, and do me a favor, don't turn the news on. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, Kind of told her what the deal was, and she's like, do you want me to come down there? I'm like, no, we're good. I got a handle, right? From a marriage perspective, that was probably a mistake. She wanted to come down and help and do some things. I probably should at least let her go to the police department and do what she, feel like she was making a difference. But,
Now they're allowed to come down as
At the time, they were not.
Yeah.
But at least be involved in the process, right? I kind of shunned that, and that was a mistake. I mean, that's the bravado side of me coming out in that, and that was a mistake looking back on it.
Yeah. And everybody's different,
Yeah.
And
I was fine. I literally was fine.
Yeah.
The whole thing. I mean, clearly it sucks, right? It's awkward. It sucks. I've got an escort officer that I don't really know all that well. I mean, I know who he is, but I don't know.
You had a better offer, but you didn't ask.
Oh well, no, you did show up there, but I was assigned.
Yeah.
To do that over again, I would have just said, I'm going with him.
Yeah.
I'm going with Raul. I'm going to do that, right? Yeah. Or get somebody I know, because I'm not. This is.
Yeah. So did your family handle it okay when you got home?
There's some aftermath. How much detail do you want to get into on it? Because there's some things occurred.
No, that's what I was saying. Like my wife, she was with incident that I was involved in. Well, I think you were there too. That incident, another SWAT incident that we were all involved in.
I was.
And my wife was really good. I called her and she was like, congratulations, you're still alive.
Yeah.
She's like, good job.
Right. And at the time, my wife's a policeman's wife for a number of years, right? It's just another one of those calls in the middle of the night, right? She's like, are you good? Yeah, I'm good. She's like, okay, well, cool.
Yeah.
Right. And so that part of it was fine. I think looking back on it, she wanted to be more involved.
Yeah.
In the process, and I should have afforded that opportunity. And if it happens again, I will. I mean, obviously, lessons learned, right?
Sure.
I will afford her that opportunity the next time.
And that's also, I think, with the CITF. I know I was down at the hotel, and they were going to take some of my clothes. And I was like, hey, I couldn't find anybody no one was available, so I got a hold of my daughter-in-law at the time, and she went home, grabbed a duffel bag, put some clothes in it, and brought it over.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And she, of course, she shows up there, and everybody's like, "Who's this? You're here to see who?" But yeah, I mean, I think things have changed. My understanding.
Things have changed, right? And for the better. I mean, really, again, going back to we evolve. We look at some of the things we do. The task force looks at some of the things they do, and they evolve and they get better. I mean, they're really good at it now. I mean, it's like.
Yeah,
like a well-oiled machine now.
There's been a lot of shootings. Since.
I get it, but I mean, it's really good.
Yeah.
Those guys are really good, and the guys the detectives that investigated it, the lead detective on that was from Boise, and I still see him occasionally to this day and whatnot, and he was awesome. I mean, he was awesome to me. I can't even say enough good things about him.
Yeah.
So there's that. The chief we had of police at the time was new, fairly new chief, and he, that didn't go super great.
How about for you? You hear people talk about PTSD and all that kind of stuff. And what's funny is like, you hear some people that talk about, I got PTSD, and I know a lot of guys. The majority of guys that I know. They've had multiple incidents, and it's just like there's a difference, I think, from just having some stress because it was a stressful incident to actual PTSD. I think there's a difference.
And I would agree with you. And I think if we're looking at honestly, right? You did quarter century, right, of this stuff, and I'm approaching that.
Yeah.
There is stuff that happens throughout the course of our career that is way worse than that.
Yeah.
Way worse than an officer-involved shooting. The aftermath of the shooting, the lawsuits, the civil side of it, there's some bad juju that comes from us out of that, but that's not part of the incident. That's just the stresses of life and how that goes, right? But other things that we see and do, and I don't go into details on it, but you can imagine, child abuse cases,
sure.
Sex abuse cases, real super traumatic felony domestic violence cases. Injury crashes where you've got toddlers that are dismembered and things, right? I mean, the things that we come across, those are traumatic. That's the stuff that causes the things we don't sleep over. That ain't the shooting.
Yeah.
That suspect, he made his decisions, and I was forced to react to his decisions. It is what it is.
And that's the way.
I don't feel bad about that one bit. And I'll be honest with you, I never lost any sleep over that.
And that's the way officer-involved shootings are. I mean, we react to what the other guy is doing,
right?
And I think that's the way it should be. I don't think we should feel bad for for being involved and having to pull the trigger because you're reacting to what they're doing.
There's other things in our career that cause sleepless nights, but that wasn't one of them.
Yeah, that's good. Like I say, I know guys who've been in multiple incidents more than you and I have, and
I know some of the guys you're talking about.
Yeah, and they don't have any issues. They don't have any PTSD. Like I say, it does cause some stress. It always causes stress, obviously.
Well, honestly, here's the thing: anytime you have an officer-involved shooting, you get sued.
The thing I hate, I felt like often the second part of my career, second half, I guess, it seemed like there was a lot. You hear a lot of talk about PTSD. Guys are going to get PTSD, and it's just like, I'm like, quit telling guys that they're going to get it because not everybody gets it.
Not everybody gets it,
and they should know about it, but don't tell them that they're going to get it because most people don't. At least the people I know.
Yeah, like I said, there's again. I'll go back to that incident did not cause me any sleepless nights. I don't worry. It still doesn't.
You feel like you did the right thing.
I do. I feel like I protected myself and I protected the 3 other people that went into that room with me. And I'll be honest with you, at the end of the day, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, and we should. That's what police officers do: protect themselves, protect other people. And
there's that moment of. There's a lot of guys go through their careers, and I was one of them. I wondered if that thing ever happened. If you're ever faced with that, how would you react to it? And I'll be honest with you, I reacted well.
Yeah. My
opinion. I reacted well to that, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
That side of it.
Well, good. It's like I was in another incident where an officer, a deputy, shot somebody, and within about a minute or so after that, he kind of started reacting, having that stress, like, did I do something wrong? And I'm like, and he was one of our team members, and I'm like, man, I go, you're only doing what we train for. Yeah. I go, we're training. Right. This is what we train for weekly, and you're only doing what you were trained to do. And he kind of like, okay, yeah, I guess this is what we do train for.
Yeah, it's what we train for. It's just another day at the office in that particular day.
Yeah.
So, I don't
obviously
worry
if we can have different outcomes, we try to always have different outcomes, but sometimes that is the last resort, right? So.
Yeah, and looking at different outcomes, we talked about it earlier, but we're not going to go and recreate that same set of circumstances that led to that shooting anymore.
Yeah.
Right? We got better.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're on a little over an hour. Is there anything else that you think that that you want to add that kind of sticks out from that incident?
I'll finish with this. We didn't dive into too much of this side of it, but it's anytime you have one of these incidents, it's the aftermath. And different agencies handle different things differently and how they do their internal investigations of different things. But what I would challenge other cops to do is to make sure that they're there for their buddies. Those investigations, some of that stuff can be very challenging, and that's where the stress comes from. And how we handle that stress, everybody handles that a little bit differently. Have your brothers back. Have your brothers back on that stuff and make sure they're good. That's the only thing I would add to that. Everybody handles it, and we know some people that had some struggles with some of that, right?
Yeah.
My agency at that particular time, and with that particular administrator, didn't handle that well, and it caused a bunch of stress. And the only guys I had available to me was SWAT guys, right? And so SWAT guys kind of kept me sane and level. And I had that backing, but boy, it's tough, man.
I did an interview not too long ago. I think it was my second interview with Sage Hickam. I don't know if you remember Sage. He worked for the county. He was not a SWAT guy, but he was a good patrol guy, really good guy. And he talked about having PTSD, and eventually he left law enforcement for real estate. But he talked about how, once the investigations are over and kind of everybody goes, their separate ways, and he's kind of left alone, that he said he was struggling. Yeah. And, you get guys that will call and say, hey, man, if you need anything, let me know. And, of course, you're like, okay, I'll let you know. But nobody ever reaches out. He says
that's the problem.
He says it would have been better if guys would just come up and say, hey, dude, let's go out to dinner tonight.
Correct.
Hey, let's go.
Right.
I'm coming to pick you up, or we're going to go out for a drink or whatever, right?
Yeah, and in my case, if you want to indulge me for just a minute, in my case, I got angry and bitter over how some of the agency handled some stuff. And there were some people kind of running their mouth about we had no business being there. There was a whole bunch of armchair quarterbacking going on. Oh, fine. But there were some things that were going on there, and that caused a tremendous amount of stress. And then the lawsuit was piled on top of that. I turned into a bit of an a-hole there for a while as a result of some of that.
More than?
Yeah, more. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, more. Yeah, and at the end of the day, at some point I finally took a good hard look in the mirror and looked in the mirror. The thing looking at me in the mirror was the problem, right? It was, and so I had to make some adjustments to overcome some of that.
Was there something that said? Did something happen, or somebody say something to you that you're like, "Hey, I'm getting too bitter. I need."
Yeah,
to change something."
I had to come to Jesus with a couple of people, like, "Hey, bro," and a couple of people on the team and some other places, and unfortunately for me, I kind of burned some bridges with some people that I considered friends at the time as a result of some of that, and it's my fault, right? I took that. I'm going to take that one on the chin, but it goes back to the same thing Sage said. It would have been helpful if
guys just come grab you and say, "Hey, let's
Right.
go."
Yep.
Yeah, because when people just say, "Hey,
Yep.
let me know if you need anything," no one ever reaches out.
No,
no one ever calls and says, "Hey, remember you said if I need anything, I'm calling you now."
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
because that's not how we're wired, right?
Yeah, we're like, "Oh, I got to handle this myself."
So, there was a lot to it, a lot of moving parts there. But I would just kind of end with, have your brother's back. Just like you said, if you're going to reach out and say, let's go do this, instead of, if you need something, let me know. You and I and others got to a point where we had and for a number of years, anybody that was on the team that had an officer involved shooting, that we all made meals and remember?
Yeah.
And we would take meals to that officer's family and drop that stuff off and get involved in their family and get involved in their stuff and whatnot. Even if it was a giant pain in their hind end and they didn't want it, we still did it anyway, right? So that was how we as a team, our teammates, we got involved with each other and did that stuff. And that was, honestly, for me, it was a product of my incident. And if I want to see things change, I'm gonna affect it. I'm gonna be part of the solution.
Yeah, I think if you got a buddy who's been involved in a critical incident, it doesn't even have to be a shooting, right? Like you said, it's a lot of these other calls that officers go on that can cause you problems. You need to not just say, "Let me know if you need anything." I think we need to physically go over, knock on the door,
And go do something.
Go do something, or pull them out to the driveway, have a one-on-one talk.
Yes.
Make sure that guys are doing okay.
Pop the tailgate and pop a beer and sit down and just...
Yeah. What if you don't drink beer like me? I'll drink root beer though.
Dude, so hey, on that note, I don't drink that much anymore either, honestly. But I found this cool thing that's called ginger beer. It's what they make like a Moscow Mule or something out of. But it comes in a bottle and it looks like a beer.
Yeah.
But it's not, and it's sugar free because I'm pretty much keto now, and so I have to have these. I do these different things, and so it's wonderful. It's like magical.
Wow, it's good to know.
I know.
My daughter does keto diet, so maybe I'll let her know.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I actually feel like I'm having a beer, but really I'm not.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. This is a good conversation. I actually learned some things, some details that I didn't know about it, even though I was kind of around at the time. And this has been awesome hanging out with you for
Sure,
today.
dude. I'm looking forward to doing some more of this, I'll be honest.
The acoustics on these microphones may not be the best today. We're inside of a cabin that has some kind of tall ceilings and some wooden floors here, so kind of acoustics not the best.
It's a beautiful place to sit down and do this stuff.
But it's been great. We've been up on the hillside putting up steel targets that we're going to shoot later, and it's been
hard
great.
people doing hard things. We actually packed those steel targets in a backpack and walked them up and down the mountain.
Like thousands of feet.
Yeah. I measured it. It was 0.56 miles just to get to those targets, and it was because I had to go back up and down the truck a couple times, get the weed whacker and some other stuff. Right. It was 1,800 feet, half a mile.
Yeah, I was breathing hard, but it was a good time. It'll be worth it once we start putting
Looking
rounds
forward to
down range. So, all right, Brian.
Thanks, bud.
We'll end this here, and we'll continue hopefully in a few days and get some rounds down range.
Heck yeah.
All right, later.